Today I'm going to talk about something that's really hard to talk about. This is like the fifth try. Okay. This is one of the traumatic things that happened to me that made me who I am today. And both of my children are 21. My oldest children are 21 now. So I feel like I can talk about it publicly. They've heard from me, the story of it as adults now that I've reconnected with them. So, both being 21, they are Irish twins, 10 months apart. And I was a teen mom. I met a 24-year-old man when I was 15. And I was pregnant within months with my daughter Ariana. Actually, I remember on September 11th, I was standing in front of the TV, holding my belly, pregnant with my daughter, 15 years old, and just watching the destruction. I had her on May 23rd, about 2 weeks after I turned 16, and then after having her, I discovered that her father, the 24-year-old man, was addicted to crack. And I thought, a family might be a reason he'll stop, and begged him to stop. I mean, I used alcohol and ecstasy and all kinds of mushrooms, and, I was not innocent, but when I was pregnant, I stopped. And while I was pregnant, he was going to strip clubs and partying. But, so I had my daughter and kept on trying to save him, hoping he would stop with wanting to party all the time and the cocaine and the dealing drugs. And he had a good job, so he didn't really need to. And I thought there was hope. And when my daughter was about 4 or 5 months old, I was on the pill and breastfeeding, so I couldn't do any stronger birth control than that, and got pregnant with my son. I didn't know until I was 6 months pregnant, and he was popped up by surprise. And he was born on March 6th, just 2-3 months before his sister returned here. I don't know if my math is right. This is an emotional thing, and I'm trying to just state the facts here. So last time I told this story publicly, I had a co-host, and my face wasn't showing. I was somewhat mostly anonymous. So he kind of kept me on track, asking me questions, and it was way easier to tell the story. When you're in therapy telling the story, the therapist is kind of guiding you through it. And you're supposed to get into the emotional aspects, and that's not why I'm doing this. It's not for the emotional aspects of it. I've come to my peace with this thing happening. But anyways, I'm here to explain how the system works, or was working back in the early 2000s. So by 2003, I had 2 children. I was 17 years old. And my kid's father wouldn't stop using. I, had my friends gather around me as a support system. His mom helped us get an apartment. So I was just home, raising the kids. He was going to work, but still, partying. And so whenever I would hang out with my friends, it was a problem, even though I would have my kids with me. And one of my friends was also a teen mom, so it made a couple of them actually, but one of my very close friends. It made it easier. We would hang out together with our kids, His mother and him didn't like that. I was supposed to stay home with the kids by myself. And So I had some postpartum and I was losing my mind, but you know, just trying my best to do whatever I had to do to keep him clean. And there was an incident one night where he was really high, and my friend and I were trying to get him to go into rehab. We brought him to the hospital because he was hiding up in trees and stuff. We brought him to the hospital, and he locked himself in the back of the Blazer and took a whole bottle of Xanax. So somehow we got him into the hospital, they gave him the coal, and they sent him up to rehab in Boston. Before he left, I told him, if you don't stop this now, go get clean, then it's over. Just me and the kids, I'll be fine. I don't want to be with you if this is what you're gonna do. This is what I grew up in, and I'm here to break a cycle. You know, I was a teenager, but I already thought I was grown. That was why I hadn't, you know, had a boyfriend that was 24. So, anyways, I'm 17 years old, home alone with the 2 kids, and he was in the detox for 2 days. And I took both kids, after being in the house for 2 days, I took both kids in his vehicle from the city we lived in and to my hometown to see my friends. My dad was about to go away for back surgery, so I wanted to say, you know, let him see the kids and say bye to him for a while, and because he was going to go up to Framingham where his girlfriend was taking care of him, and see my friends who all lived in the same apartment complex. Let Ari, who was old enough to play with the other kids, play while I took care of her newborn brother. His mother showed up, flipping out that I had his vehicle. I should be home with the kids. My son was a newborn and shouldn't be out. Now, mind you, he had jaundice really bad when he was born, and they sent me home with him, and I stayed home for the first 2 months, keeping him in the sun and getting rid of his jaundice. And the doctor said he was safe to go out and be in the sun and be around people now. He was healed. So, you know, I was being a good mom. I wasn't just out gallivanting. She was saying I was, while he was in rehab. So she took the vehicle, and I don't remember who, I'm pretty sure my friend gave me a ride home, because my dad, like I said, had back surgery anyway. So I went home with the 2 kids, and there was no vehicle now, but I, you know, have a small support system between my friends and my aunt, who was like a second mom to me my whole life. And this is gonna take longer than I thought. All of a sudden he shows up after being in the rehab for 2 days. He didn't even give himself a chance to detox. Says he's going in the shower. Goes in the shower, and I can smell the crack smoke. And I walk into the bedroom, and he just has a safe open with like an ounce of cocaine just sitting there. And he's in the bathroom getting high. So I'm banging on the door. I'm like, you need to get that stuff and get out. Go somewhere else and get high. You know, we'll figure things out after. Just get out of here. You know. And this is after he was in the shower for 45 minutes, an hour. You know, trying to avoid conflict at this point. Well, he went down to his truck to get something. And I know because he left his cocaine there. And so I went and flushed it down the toilet. And he flipped out, called the police, and said that I broke a phone over his head. So the police show up. Mind you, I'm 17. He's 26 now. And I'm explaining I have a newborn child. I had told him to go detox and rehab and get clean and not come home until he was, and he brought drugs home. So I flushed him. The cop asked me why I didn't call them. There are many reasons why I don't call cops still to this day, and I explained to him because it would have just caused more problems if I called you and told you I had drugs in my house with my 2 children here. Not because I'm not stupid. Apparently they didn't like my answers. They didn't like the truth of what happened. Now, I'm not saying I was an angel and I wasn't screaming and yelling and cussing before he called the cops, because I was pissed. When the cops showed up, I was calm. I was like, look, the phone that he's saying I broke over his head is the one he used to call you. I promise you, if I break a phone, I'm going to break it completely. And they laughed about that and took me away. I think they put me in protective custody. They couldn't charge me with anything. Before the cops showed up, he had scratched his face, and I think they were asking him if he was going to charge me, and he said, I don't want you to charge her, I just want you to take her out of here, or something like that. Or he could have tried to charge me. I'm not sure what happened. I just know the cops took me out of there. My friends came and picked me up from jail that night, so pretty sure I didn't get charged. But then the next day I was served with a restraining order against him and my children. So what followed after was endless, probably file this thick of 3 years of me fighting with DSS, Department of Social Services. It's probably DCF now. His mother and him for my children. They put me on drug tests for the color red every other day, and I always passed every single one. Never failed, not even for alcohol. I quit smoking weed, which is something that I've always kind of done off and on for anxiety rather than take the anxiety medicine. And I even stopped that. I just wanted my children. I grew up in a broken home, and I knew I could do it on my own if I had to. And DSS kept me on supervised visits, and even though I was passing their drug tests and doing everything they asked, I had been in therapy since I was a child because of my parents' divorce, so I never stopped that. And then he came and found me one day, and he said, I turned 18, and he came and found me. This all happened before I even turned 18, right before I turned 18. The day I turned 18, he came. I was walking down the road from the store to the apartment complex my dad lived in, and he was obviously at the house with the kids and his mom, the apartment that we lived at, and that's where I was staying with my dad. And he told me if I didn't marry him, I would never see my children again. I believed him. My whole family hated me, my friends hated me, and I fell for it. Everything he said, I believed. So I did. I married him, and I went through about 4 to 6 months of trying to have a marriage with somebody who was an addict. And he was trying not to party, but he was. He was taking me out drinking, and I had to do what he wanted or stay home by myself and visit the kids with him at the DSS office. And we went out and partied one night at the bar, and we were drunk when we came home, and I was yelling at him that it was his fault that the kids weren't with us, and this isn't the life I want. And he threw me against the wall. I woke up to a broken collarbone. He tried to snap it back into place. That fucking hurt. So after that happened, I knew I had to leave him. Even if my kids came home, what were they coming home to? So I went into a meeting with DSS, and this is now probably about a year, a little bit less than a year into the DSS investigation. We're still on drug tests every other day and passing them all. Until you be drinking, we drank over the weekend, so we wouldn't have to, you know what I mean. Anyways, I asked to speak to them alone, which automatically he knew why. This was scary in and of itself because I didn't know if they were going to believe me. And I told them, he's the one who broke my collarbone 2 months ago. Or however, it was a few week period of time. The timeline is still. And they said, well, we knew that. We were just waiting for you to tell us. So they put a restraining order on him, and I got the apartment. And, in the meantime, in our relationship, he was always going to the strip club. I was too young to go to the strip club, so I got a job stripping so that I could be at the strip club because that's where he wanted to be. And I was making lots of money, and he didn't have to worry about paying rent. I was paying for everything. Anyway, so yeah, I'm working at the strip club about a month after I turned 18. And anyway, so they said, well, we knew that. And, I was in the apartment, and his dad came and got all his things, his safe, with the spare key to my car, which we had loans out on, huge payments. Thank God I was stripping because I would have made a $500 car payment. And subsequently, one day I walk out to go to work. I'm still following all the DSS protocols and working at the strip club, but I'm not drinking, I'm not smoking, I'm not doing drugs. I'm working mostly days because that was just where I felt more comfortable. I'm an introverted person. And that was where my clients were, so I was working the days, putting money in the bank, being responsible grown up. And I came out one day and my car was gone. And then I get a note on my mailbox that says that they had found it in a ditch in Fall River, one city up from where I lived. And it had been set on fire. And that it was me, the insurance said it was me who had done it because it was done with the key. It was done with the key. So that set me back many pegs. But I kept fighting. I missed some visits with my kids at the supervision. They wouldn't. It was now, at this point, it's almost 2 years into a DSS investigation, and I'm still on the color red, passing my drug tests, and just lost my car, so I'm going to have to cab it back and forth to work, and I lost the apartment. Ended up having to move back in with my aunt, which was where I was living when I was 15 and got pregnant. I got a job as a CNA because the court date I went to, the judge said, as long as you're stripping, you will never have your children back. And we're keeping you on the red drug test because of where you work, and supervised visits because of where you work. Now, the DSS never said as much, but the judge said it to me that day. And so I quit my job and moved back in on my own. Got a job as a CNA, which I had already had my CNA license. That's what I was doing before I started stripping. But I couldn't afford a place to live. I finally saved up the money to get a car and pay car insurance. I finally got DSS to start working with me. They lowered my drug tests. And they were like, we want reunification with you and the kids, but you don't have much of a support system, so we're just gonna look into shelters and stuff. And while they were trying to find an option, places that me and my kid could go, and I was continuing to jump through their hoops, I'm drowning, trying to make it to all these supervised visits with the mother, who every time I show up at her house, she says I'm drunk. or hi, or she doesn't answer the door and says, I said it was at 2, not 1, and, or, what they do. So, DSS found a shelter they wanted me to go into. This is 2.5, 3 years of the children being with their grandmother, and my separation from my husband, and my dad was still away with back surgery, so that part of my support system was, healing and busy. We go into court for the final trial, and Judge Ward is sitting there asking DSS, why has this gone on so long? And they explain the situation. And now, keep in mind, at the court, they allowed his new girlfriend to go on the stand and talk about me with my children, because she went to high school with me. She never saw me with my children. I hadn't seen her since high school. She was allowed to go on the stand as a witness. But my aunt wasn't even allowed to sit in the courtroom. The one support system I had friends, but they all had, their own things going on. Like I said, one of them was a teen mom herself, so they weren't able to make it to court that day. But I did have the support system of them around, emotionally, physically there, to help with things. But they just weren't at the court date that day. And Judge Ward puts me up on the stand, the third day of my aunt not being allowed to sit in the courtroom with me. And she's asking me questions. DSS is saying if we don't reunify these kids with their mother, the mother-in-law and the family is going to completely alienate her from her children and her children from her. We want reunification. That's what we're for. We found a shelter that works like a group home. Everybody's, young or poor parents. And it was a building that they had converted with one kitchen and, community living. You have your own bedroom, you have a curfew, you have, chores, but you and your children have your own separate space, and they would help me get a job, and, I had my vehicle. She says, why did you stop stripping? Judge Ward looks at me and says, why did you stop working at the strip club if you were making such good money and you were able to afford a place to live? And I said, because the last judge that I went to trial with a year and a half ago, however period of time it was, she said that if I didn't stop stripping, I'd never have my kids back. And she looked at me and she said, well, that's illegal. You should have known that. You should have never stopped stripping. I'm not going to give these children to you to go be poor and destitute and live off of the state and taxpayers' help when you have no support system and no money. Then give them to a 2-parent family, their grandparents, and a full support system. They can financially support them. She subsequently left the mother-in-law in charge of visitation, even though the Department of Social Services these are the facts. I get a little emotional while stating them. I'm not saying I'm an angel. The time I was fighting for my children was the hardest time of my life, but I jumped through all of their fucking hoops. And they knew it at the end. They were saying it to the judge at the end. So Judge Ward, I called her out on the podcasts. Now I'm doing it with my face. The last time I told the story, my life kind of turned into a chaotic shitstorm. We'll see what happens this time. I never didn't want my children. After losing them, that was the first traumatic thing in this life that brought me to my knees, and I don't remember anything for months after. For months. I think I was just trying to die. And the world was convincing me they were better off without me anyways. So, thank God, my youngest is 17. She saved my life. So that's it. I'm gonna post this. I'm not gonna listen to it. I'm not gonna watch it. If you have any questions, I will answer them. Thank you for listening. I love you all. Ari and Richie, my babies, I love you so much. And I'm so sorry for you having to grow up without me.